Hello, everybody, and welcome to Box Seat Banter. I'm your host, Billy Ballas, a longtime baseball coach, and I'm broadcasting today from Wrigleyville in Chicago. And joining me today to discuss the Chicago Cubs is a lifelong Cubs fan, born and raised in Chicago, but now living in Los Angeles. But despite living in LA, he traveled with his 5-6 month old child to Chicago in October of 2016 to be in Chicago for the World Series. Joining me, Sam Trovlo. Sam, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Billy. Glad to be here. It was the greatest year ever, 2016. The greatest year ever.
It was a long time coming, and one that Chicago certainly relished. Now, we're talking about the Cubs today. They've, been in existence back since 1870. They started as the Chicago White Stockings, actually. They were a charter member of the National League, joining in 1876. A couple of their early stars are Albert Spalding, which, if that name is familiar, it is the Spalding who created that sporting goods company, and Cap Anson. Spalding, retired to start that sporting goods company, and he became the owner of the club. And Cap Anson was a player manager. Then the nickname transitioned from the White Stockings. In 1890, they were the Chicago Colts. Sometimes they were referred to as Anson's Colts, since Anson was that player manager. They were first referred to the Cubs in 1902, and they officially became the Cubs in 1907. It's kind of funny to look at the nicknames of teams way back in the day. In those early days, they weren't necessarily consistent like they are now. I don't know if they had all those market research and coming up with these team names. Now, Sam, we have these, when there's an expansion team, the Rays, the Marlins, or whatever, they go through all this trouble, the Rockies, to come up with these names. I don't know what they were doing back in the 1800s when they came up with this stuff.
Yeah, not much thought was put into it, and it never sat well with me that the first name we got was the Chicago White Sox. Really? The White Sox was our first name.
Yeah.
Though. It took us 32 years, 35 years. So.
And so they've played in Wrigley Field since 1916. Originally, though, it was not known as Wrigley Field. The first Wrigley Field, Sam, do you actually know where the first Wrigley Field was?
I do not. I know it wasn't in the location that it is right now.
Well, it was the first Wrigley Field was actually in Los Angeles. The Cubs, right. Yeah, in downtown LA.
Wrigley loved LA.
Yeah, and the Cubs, it was a AAA park for the Pacific Coast League. The Cubs had had a minor league team there at some point, but yeah, Wrigley had ties in LA. He had a lot of ties in Catalina. The Cubs would train in the spring in Catalina, but yeah, so the Wrigley Field in Chicago is actually older than the Wrigley Field in LA. However, it was originally like Weidman's Park or something.
Correct.
Exactly. And so in LA, it was called Wrigley Field. Then after it was named Wrigley Field in LA, the Chicago Wrigley Field was named Wrigley Field. So yeah, they've been there since 1916. And also, Sam, now we're broadcasting this on August 8th. Do you know what significant moment happened in Wrigley Field on August 8th?
On August 8th. You got me on that one. I want to hear it, though.
I believe it was 1988. So 8/8/88, the first night game in Wrigley Field.
Very good. Now, Was this the first night game that was actually played? Because I know the first night game technically was rained out.
Okay. I don't know. I happened to see it scrolling Twitter today. On I think it was the Baseball Hall of Fame account who tweeted it, but yeah, first night game. So we'll have to go back and check. Maybe one of our listeners can chime in who was maybe at the game. So yeah, they've been in
up until then. A lot of day games.
yeah. I mean, still, that's one of the charms of Wrigley Field is all those day games. And yeah, so now looking back at the past quarter century, the Cubs have division titles in 03, 07, 08, then 16 and 17. They were the wild card teams in 98, 2015, and 2018. And they won that pennant, as we briefly touched on, in 2016. And that was when they won the World Series, ending a 108-year drought, which is the longest drought between championships. Now, there are teams who have never won a championship, but that was the longest drought in North American sports history. Their previous World Series titles were in 07 and 08.
I barely remember those.
Now, that World Series you mentioned, it was such a great year in Chicago to end that long suffering. Sam, what was it like being in Chicago for that
amazing,
win?
Especially the way the game ended, right?
Yeah.
It was a complete roller coaster. Started off strong. We got a nice lead. Just to see it slowly dwindle away with Ray J. Davis's home run against the assassin relief pitcher of the year. Go figure that one out. But It was tremendous. And then obviously the rain delay, that brought about a lot of anxiety. You could feel it with the people you were hanging out with. It was just amazing, honestly. And the finish was fantastic. So big relief. There are a lot of us that followed us for a lot of years, a bunch of my friends, and we were couldn't be happier. Like I said, 2016 was a fantastic year.
And it came back from a 3-1 deficit in that series, correct?
Correct. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll touch more on the World Series win as well as some other items with the Cubs, with players as we get into this. But yeah, that is the kind of overview of the Chicago Cubs. Last week, we discussed the Reds, and the trivia question on the show last week was that their last playoff series win was back in 1995 in the National League Divisional Series. They swept the Dodgers back then. They've been in the postseason a couple times since, but have not won a series. So the trivia question was, who won that clinching Game 3 for the Reds? I remember my guest, Wick Terrell, he had a guess. Before I reveal the answer, Sam, I don't know if you would even remember anything about the Reds in the mid-90s. Do you want to venture a guess at that question?
Mid-90s were very tough for me. They were my college years. And as we know, those college years, sometimes you just get lost. 95 was definitely, or the 95 Reds playoff series win was definitely something that is lost. I really don't have much information on that, so I would love to hear.
Okay, well, Wick Terrell actually threw out a guess of David Wells, which I was surprised to, remember that David Wells played with the Reds. I don't picture him with the Reds, and that was actually the correct answer. Wick Terrell, Good job, good pull. David Wells won Game 3 for the Reds as the last time that they won a playoff series.
Amazing.
That brings us to this week's trivia question about the Cubs. So, as we've mentioned, as everyone's familiar with, they won the World Series in 2016. And so they won, the Division Series, the NLCS, and the World Series, obviously. Who were the 3 winning pitchers in the deciding games in each of those series? So I know, I don't know how many games the NLDS went. The NLCS, I know they won in 6 over the Dodgers. In the World Series, they won in 7 over the Indians. So Can you name the 3 winning pitchers?
Gosh, that is good. Opening series was versus...
Was it the Nationals? Or... No. It was the... was it the Cardinals? No, not the Cardinals.
No.
Who was...
No.
Because I know the Dodgers played the Nats in the NLDS, and so the Cubs, I believe, played the Giants.
The Giants.
The Giants.
We did play the Giants. Yes, correct. As far as the winning pitchers go, oh man, you got me on that one. I could imagine the World Series. It was, I think Mike Montgomery got the save
Mm-hmm.
game, but he wasn't the winning pitcher. Huh. That would be probably Chapman. I think
Okay.
so. That would be the World Series. I think I got that one right.
Uh-huh.
The Dodgers, I know this holds a little bit of a
I know you're in a split household there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the Cubs, but I respect the Dodgers, and I really actually enjoy that, watching them. I cannot remember that one, that's for sure. And the Giants series is not going to be something I really can come up with, but I'm proud of myself for getting Chapman.
Okay, Chapman is so we will. I will reveal those answers on the show next week. Listeners, if you have any guesses, you can hit me up on Twitter with those guesses or on Instagram. It's at Box Seat Banter on both Twitter and Instagram. And you mentioned Mike Montgomery getting the save in that World Series Game 7. I do have an interesting fact about that. So Mike Montgomery threw the last pitch for the Cubs in Game 7 of the 2016 World Series. Trevor Bauer recorded the last out and threw the last pitch for the Indians in the top of that inning. I don't know, because it went extra innings, right? I know after the rain delay. So Trevor Bauer was on in relief for the Indians, and he threw the last pitch for the Indians. Do you know anything notable or something in common that Mike Montgomery and Trevor Bauer might have?
I do not.
They both.
I'm sure you do.
They both went to the same high school. Hart High School up in Santa Clarita, north of Los Angeles. Yeah, both, they're a very good baseball school. They've actually produced a lot of quarterbacks as well. But yeah, two pitchers through the last two pitches of the year for both teams from the same high school. That's something that I always get a kick out of.
Crazy notable. Crazy. That is great.
Now, getting back to the Cubs, now they were owned a long time by the Wrigley family for about 65 years up until 1981. Then the Tribune Company bought the team in 81. They owned it through 2008. And the Ricketts family bought the team, and they are the current owners. Some of the general managers that the team has had recently, Ed Lynch was a GM from 94 to 2000. Andy MacPhail had a short run from 2000 to 02. Jim Hendry from 02 to 2011. And Jed Hoyer has been the GM since 2011. But of course, Theo Epstein is the president of baseball operations. It's kind of that newer, trendier position that teams are having. It used to be the GM was the main guy in charge. Now it's kind of this president of baseball operations. So Theo Epstein, I mean, is he the greatest GM ever? Or
he's Cubs Hall of Fame. Those guys, Jed and Theo, probably haven't paid for a meal anywhere in town that includes their families and extended families since 2016.
Well, yes. But even before that, what did Theo Epstein do? Boston. Like the two biggest curses in baseball history. He wins in 04 with the Red Sox, ending that curse. And then he goes to Chicago and ends that curse. Like, right. It's incredible. Is he just
amazing?
Is he waiting for like another, is he going to go to Cleveland next since they haven't won? They haven't won since I think like 1948.
I would hate to lose him, but it would be quite a story to watch, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive, the things that he has done that nobody else has been able to do. Now, getting to the field, some of the field managers that the Cubs have had in recent memory, so we're going back 25 years. We're not going back too far here. I've got some facts on some managers. I want to see if you can identify the manager from the facts. So now this one,
absolutely.
This first one is pretty tough because I've mentioned this guy before. So and there wasn't a lot of stuff I could find on this guy. So it's going to be tough for you to identify him based on this. But he was an infielder in the minor leagues in the Dodgers and Cardinals organization. He got as far as AAA. He has managed in several organizations for several big league teams. Any idea on who that might be?
You really didn't give me much on that, a minor league player, huh? But had he managed teams, major league teams before then, before the Cubs?
I don't know if he has before, but I know he has since. He's been around kind of that managing and coaching fraternity.
Infield only. How many? Can you give me a little bit more? How many years did he coach?
He managed. I'll tell you when he was the manager of the Cubs. He was the Cubs manager from 95 to 99.
95 to 90. Is it 95 to 99? I'm gonna take a guess here because it was Jim Riggleman.
Yes, Jim Riggleman.
Wow. Yeah.
Now moving along, we've got a manager. Now back in his playing days in high school, he was the first African-American athlete to play sports at Stephen F. Austin High School there in Austin, Texas. He was also offered a scholarship to play football at the University of Texas. Apparently, he would have been the first black football player there, but he instead went to junior college to play baseball. He eventually reached the major leagues as a baseball player. Any guess on who that is?
This is about, is it what many consider the best players manager? Maybe. No, it's not.
No.
It's not Dusty Baker.
No.
Lost that one.
Because Dusty, I think Dusty's from, I want to say he's from Northern California.
Is he? Okay. Well, I know he was a great athlete. I mean, he played in the majors too.
Yes.
So
yes,
that's the only reason why I went that way. You got me on that one. Go ahead.
Don Baylor.
Don Baylor. Yes.
Yeah. Great hitter.
Absolutely.
And now, so Don Baylor managed the team from 2000 to 2002. Now here's something. This manager, back in his playing days, participated in the first ever high five, which, I mean, we're kind of getting away from the high five now with the coronavirus going on. Yeah. But yeah, he was a participant in the first ever high five. Do you know who that is?
That's about as random as you can get, Billy.
Well, that's okay. Go ahead.
And I'm obviously a big claim to fame. If you could give me the years again when he was managing, it'd probably help out a bit.
03 to 06.
03 to, so it's that leg. Dusty Baker.
Yes, Dusty Baker, that player's manager. So it was back in, I want to say 1977, but the Dodgers had 3 members of the 30 home run club, and he was sitting on 29 home runs. I think on like the last day of the season, he hit the 30th home run. And when he gets back to the dugout, Glenn Burke like threw his hand up, and Dusty didn't know what to do, and he slapped it, and it's the first ever high five, and changed celebrations forever. So yeah, Dusty Baker managed the team, as you mentioned, one of the great player managers. We discussed him last week on the show since he managed the Reds.
Right.
He's managed in San Francisco, in Washington, and now he is
now at Houston.
Yeah.
Yep. What a great job that is to have right now.
He's certainly the man for the job. And, Dusty, he's beloved across baseball, and, Houston, we don't need to get into this too much, but Houston is certainly, the villains of baseball right now. And my kind of take on it is that, Dusty deserves to manage in the big leagues, but Houston, they do not deserve Dusty the way that they've
agreed
acted on the field recently.
Agreed.
Now, the next manager, there's a lot that you can dig up on this guy, but this was something that I found interesting. He was a pony ball teammate of Tony La Russa. So you got 2 future, I don't know if this manager's in the Hall of Fame, but 2, future great longtime managers, pony ball teammates together. And they were teammates in Florida. That's where they grew up.
I'm pretty confident about this one, but it's probably Sweet Lou Piniella, probably, right?
Yep. Sweet Lou. Lou
His
Piniella.
outbursts were the best.
Yeah. Legendary.
Legendary outbursts.
So he managed the squad from 07 to 2010. Now this next guy, again, he was kind of like Riggleman. It's tough to find too much stuff on him, but he was a long time minor league manager. He won over 1,000 games as a minor league manager.
1,000 games. Didn't seem. Was he with managing the team for long?
Well, in the minor leagues, he won 1,000 games. So
Right, but
I don't know.
the Cubs.
No. Short time with the Cubs, couple years.
Couple of years. Got me on that one again.
Mike was it Quade?
Oh, Quaddy. Yeah,
Mike Quaddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2010 to 2011, he managed the squad.
Yep.
And
the dark years.
Yeah, we got a few of those coming. I think these three managers in a row, they didn't have the most to work with.
Yeah.
This next guy, he was an all-state high school quarterback in Northern California in the Bay Area. He managed the Cubs from 2012 to 2013.
Went a year or two. What did we get that year? 2012, 2013. Who was it? Was it Renteria?
No,
not yet. Renteria was after that.
Mm-hmm.
It was for 1 year after. It was the year before we won it. Got me on that one, and that's recent. But,
that's Dale.
Dale Sveum. Yeah.
Dale Sveum.
Used to play for Milwaukee, I believe, as a player.
And then you just guessed this guy, so you should be able to get him. He managed Mexico in the 2013 World Baseball Classic. So who would that be?
Yeah, Rick Renteria.
Yep.
He's actually the current White Sox manager. So.
Correct, yeah. So 2014, he managed the squad for just that 1 year, and it was just 1 year because all of a sudden, Andrew Friedman, who was the GM in Tampa, left Tampa to take the job in LA with the Dodgers. And as part of Joe Maddon's contract, I just gave away the next guy, but I know you know him.
The legend.
As part of his contract, he could opt out of his contract if Friedman left. So he did. A lot of people thought that the Dodgers would go after Maddon, but they did not. And so the Cubs, Theo Epstein, swooped him up, and Rick Renteria is there for a year, and they showed him the door, and they grabbed Maddon. An interesting fact about Maddon, he has won the pennant in both leagues. So he was the manager with Tampa back in 2008 when they won the AL pennant. They came up short to the Phillies in the World Series that year. Then 8 years later, in 2016, he won it with the Cubs, and he was successful winning the World Series that year. So he was a manager from 2015 to 2019. And this next manager, he was a runner-up on Dancing with the Stars.
David Ross.
Yes. I didn't realize he was on Dancing with the Stars. That's not exactly my my TV viewing. It's not on my schedule. But yeah, he was a runner-up on Dancing with the Stars. Longtime player. And he was on that Cubs 2016 World Series team. He hit a home run in Game 7.
Absolutely.
And so now, I mean, the Cubs are off to a hot start right now.
Right.
Under David Ross as the manager. It's I think it'll be interesting to watch because, he's so shortly removed from playing, and, he played with so many of those current players on the team. How do you have any opinion on how that dynamic might be with, because if it's like, you're working at a job and you're buddies with all the guys, and then all of a sudden this one guy's the boss. It's like, does that change the dynamic at all? What do you think? Do you think he's going to be successful?
Without a doubt. Especially these guys were all buddy and chum. But I believe, and when the hire first happened, I felt kind of the same way. Like, how is this going to work out? What kind of dynamic are they going to have? Consider everybody's good friends. But yeah, David Ross came out and said plainly that the relationship is there, of course, but it still will be things need to be done. People are going to be held accountable, and I believe he will, because he's so open and so transparent and communicative. I think the players get that. Small sample size, 13 games. We're 10-3. Something must be working. We have a good starting pitching staff currently. Our hitting is doing fine. Our bullpen is absolutely atrocious. But 10-3 record. So maybe he's getting through to them.
Yeah, it's certainly off to a good start. We will see, this year is such a short season, so, we don't know what's going to happen. But, when they face adversity, that's when it will be really telling, because when you're winning, I don't know what's leading to the winning, if it's his managing, if it's them playing well, or what the case is. But, when they do get to that, have to face adversity, that will be the first telling sign, I think. And he also, kind of speaks to that new age of managers. They're coming in with no coaching or managing experience.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it in New York with Aaron Boone. No one else is really coming to mind. Top of my head right now, Aaron Boone is the main one. He's a guy. Both Boone and Ross, I think had time in the, as a broadcaster.
Mm-hmm.
Then they, make the jump to the managing booth. It's not the same path as people used to. They would spend time in the minor leagues as managing, or they would be bench coaches. So it's, the job of manager has really changed as well recently, as well as the kind of path to get there.
Yeah. I think, but obviously their career paths didn't continue, but Beltran in New York didn't do much before he got hired last year. Cora, I think, was on the Houston, right?
He was a bench coach. He was the bench coach for the Astros.
A year or two. Right. But they're not doing, you're right, they're not doing those lengthy 5-10 year runs in the minor leagues to kind of learn the ropes and how to deal with management.
Yeah. Yeah, because even, Don Mattingly, he was a longtime hitting coach under Torre with the Dodgers. I think he started coaching with the Yankees, actually. Then he came to the Dodgers with Torre. But then when Torre retired and Mattingly became the manager, they sent him to Arizona. He managed in the Arizona Fall League just to get some, managing experience under his belt. Now, and that was even with being, a batting coach for several years. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how that goes. Again, managing is different, the way that teams are built, and, a lot of people think, I'm not sure how correct they are, that the orders come from above and the manager is just kind of following orders, as a puppet. But yeah, so we'll see how David Ross is. As you mentioned, they're off to a great start, 10-3. So that'll be something interesting to watch moving forward, how David Ross does there.
Right. Yeah. Well, one thing I could bring up where I feel like he's actually following through with him being the kind of manager and getting the respect from his players is that we're in a situation right now where our closer Kimbra is not really a closer, right? He's looked awful since last year. David Ross wasn't quick to keep him in that role. I mean, he's not currently our closer right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he's really, by that action alone, he's not saying, well, we paid this guy a ton of money to come and close. If he's not producing, coming through, you will not be in that role anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of my first indication from him that he's actually following through on what he's bringing to the team,
Absolutely. And the other thing that he's got going for him is, being a former catchers a lot of times make great managers, because the way that they are involved in the game and the way they see the game, a lot of time that transitions well to being a great manager. So Yeah,
Agreed.
he has the tools, and yeah, we will see how the Cubs do going forward. But good luck to David Ross and the Cubs as the Cubs manager.
You're here.
It's now time to discuss the quarter century roster for the Cubs that I built. Again, quick reminder for all our listeners out there. The rules on creating this roster are you go back 25 years. So in this situation, we're going back to 95. You pick one player per year. You cannot repeat players. You have to form a coherent roster, and you get the player for that particular season. And if you guys want to make your own roster, you can visit my website. That's boxseatbanter.com. There's a link to download a template off of Google Spreadsheets. You can fill that in with your players. If you want to do the Cubs, if you want to do another team, feel free. And I would love to see any submissions on teams that are created. So starting here with the Cubs, beginning at the catcher position, we've got Wilson Contreras from 2017. He was worth just under 4 wins that year. Hit 276, 21 bombs, solid behind the dish, worth 1.4 defensively. And, one of my favorite things about watching Contreras play is watching him throw. And he loves to
Great
throw.
arm.
Yeah, great arm back there.
Yeah. Not much of a pitch framer, which is, the current other catching statistic, right? But he has a monster arm. I think he's a converted infielder, third baseman or something like that. So
okay.
you can see where that arm comes from.
And then moving along to first base. First base is really a strength of this, the Cubs organization in the past quarter century. And we'll get to that a little later as we get to the bench. But at first base, my starter is Derek Lee from 05. I mean, huge year from Derek Lee. Worth 7.7 wins, led the league in hits with 199, doubles with 50. He hit 46 bombs that year, which did not lead the league, but you're talking about a year where you go 50 doubles and 46 bombs. That's incredible. 107 RBIs, even stole 15 bags, led the league in batting at 335, got on base at a 418 clip, led the league in slugging at 662, in OPS at 1,080, in OPS plus at 174, and in total bases at 393. Wow. He was an all-star, gold glover, and a silver slugger that year. I mean, huge year out of Derek Lee in 05. Do you have any, recollection of that year from him?
Absolutely. It was an amazing year. We had him for a few years, and luckily we did get great quality years from him, of course. But that year especially, I mean, he was kind of out of this world. I just remember him not being able to miss anything. I believe Dusty was our manager during the time, and I believe he played a big part in that year, Derek Lee's year. It made him feel comfortable. I think it was his second or third year with the Cubs, so he kind of came into his own. Unfortunately, 2005, he went nuts. The Cubs, I think, sucked. They were around 500, if I remember correctly. But
then now,
an amazing year by Derek. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And at second base, I've got Ben Zobrist, a switch hitter from 2018. He was worth 3.4 wins. Hit 305, got on base at a 378 clip. That was kind of in the twilight of his career, but still a very versatile player. Can play, I don't know if he could play short at that point, but he could play in the outfield. And, yeah, so I've got him at second. At third base, Chris Bryant from 2016. He won the MVP that year, 7.3 wins, hit 39 home runs, drove in over 100, triple slash line of 292, 385, 554. And another versatile player. I mean, that year alone, he played third, left, right, first, center, even played a tiny bit of shortstop. So very versatile
for an MVP.
Yeah. Very versatile player. He's the number 2 pick out of University of San Diego back when he was drafted. Then at shortstop, Javi Baez from 2019 worth 6 wins. Another very versatile defensive player. You know, he started out at second base, then they moved him. Well, I think he has always been a shortstop, but when he came up, he was at second base. Now he's playing shortstop again. Hit 281. His kind of lacks in the on-base skills. Only got on base at a 316, but he slugged 531. So he swings big. Hit 29 home runs. He's got a lot of pop, a lot of swing and miss at those sliders down and away. But another great defensive player.
Amazing.
Yeah, and he was worth 3.3 wins with the glove last year.
And his tags we all know about. I mean, He does stuff that I've never seen anybody do. So,
I mean, a lot of times for many years we've seen defensive plays on, the plays of the week and all the highlights, diving plays, great throws. But I mean, yeah, as you mentioned, he made tagging cool. Like you'd never see a tag on a play of the week until Javi Baez came along.
2 days ago, he did it again.
Yeah.
Stays deep, lets the ball come to him. That way it's in the path of the runner. It's just, it's great.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the excitement that he has, when Contreras throws a guy out there and, we've seen it in the World Baseball Classic as well.
That's right.
A lot of flair, he plays with a lot of swag.
Mm-hmm.
Now moving along to the outfield, in left, I've got the left-handed hitting Henry Rodriguez. Oh, Henry.
Where did you pull that one from?
He's
1999.
1999. He hit 304, 381, 544. So great triple slash line. Hit 26 home runs. Solid year, worth 3.2 wins, but a good hitter. Did they shower him with those Henry candy bars?
They did, exactly. He got a lot of showers that year.
And then in center field, we got the switch hitter Brian McRae from 95. Led the league in at-bats with 580. He hit 288, worth 3.4 wins. Then in right field, slamming Sammy Sosa. There were a lot of options on what year to pick for him.
Pick the year.
And I went with 01. He was worth 10.3 wins. Wow. Led the league in runs, 146 runs. Wow. And I mean, that's from like a 3-4 hitter, not a leadoff guy.
Right.
Incredible. Drove in 160 to lead the league. Wow. And he hit 64 home runs. Right. I think Sosa 3 times hit over 60 home runs.
He did.
And he has never led the league in home runs.
That's an amazing stat. And really, one thing that if you watched a lot of the Cubs games is he brought the energy every single game. At the beginning of the game, he would sprint, not jog, sprint out to right field and have the crowd in the right field bleachers cheer him on. It was a pretty amazing sight every single game.
Yeah. And I mean, this year, so I got him in 01, and I remember in one of their, I don't know if it was their first game after the 9/11 attacks, he had that American flag that he proudly ran out there holding. He was an exciting player. Also led the league with 425 total bases that year. He hit 328, 437, 737. He slugged 737, an OPS of 1174. He did not lead the league in any of those 4 categories that year because I think there was a guy named Barry Bonds. So, Sosa and Bonds, they both might have been doing it artificially. But, yeah, those numbers are just insane.
Yeah. And earlier in his career, I think Mark McGwire overshadowed him, right?
Yeah, because that was in 98. That's when Sosa hit 66. And and McGuire hit 70. And then, yeah, I think both other times that he hit over 60 home runs, I think Bonds had more. So that's the starting lineup. Now moving along to the bench, we've got Eric Young from 2000. He was worth 3.3 wins. He stole 54 bags. Got on base at a 367 clip, so decent there, decent on base to steal all those bags. And then we've got a couple first basemen also on the bench. We've got Anthony Rizzo from 2014. The lefty was worth 5.6 wins. And he, let's see, hit 32 bombs, hit 286, got on base at 386, slugging at 527. And then Mark Grace, another lefty first baseman in 97, worth
90s.
worth 4.2 wins, hit 319, 409, 465. And in the outfield, we've got Alfonso Soriano in 2012. Hit 32 home runs, drove in 108. He struck out 153 times, only walked 44. Right. So yeah,
very similar to Javi Baez on that one. You throw him on low and outside slider, and you pretty much could get him every single time.
Yeah, but when you miss, he connects and he hits it a long way.
That's right.
Then the backup catcher, Giovanni Soto from 2010. He hit 17 home runs, hit 280, 393, 497. So solid production there from the backstop there. So both catchers pretty solid back there. You know, an 890 OPS from your backup catcher. That's pretty solid there. I think that was that his rookie year in 2010?
I think it was a second or third year, and to be quite honest, we as a fan base expected more from him. I think that was his last good year.
Yeah, he really did. He burst on the scene and then he kind of faded quickly.
Yeah.
So that's that's the position players I've assembled here. Before we move on to the pitching staff, do you have any comments you want to share on any of these players, or just the lineup that I've built?
No, the lineup is great. I mean, the construction of the lineup is fantastic. You have a lot of guys in here that were at the top of their game according to those years. Like I said, you threw a good one in there with the Henry Rodriguez one. I didn't expect that one to pop up here, but overall, very well constructed. Yeah, it looks good. Looks good. There's Cubs have had a lot of losing years, and during those losing years, you really don't have a lot of talent on those teams. So you did a great job of digging these out.
All right, thank you. And now we will move to the pitching staff. And let's get started here with Jake Arrieta from 2015.
Highway robbery, that trade. Highway robbery.
Yeah. Now, so that trade was with the Orioles, correct?
That was with the Orioles. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and he was kind of never anything with the Orioles. Then all of a sudden, he blossomed into a star. He won the Cy Young Award that year in 2015. He went 22-6, led the league in wins. ERA of 1.77, which actually did not lead the league. I think Greinke might have been slightly lower. Mm-hmm. But Arrieta had 33 starts, led the league there. Workhorse went 229 innings, led the league with 4 complete games and 3 shutouts. Also led the league in hits per 9 at 5.9 and home runs per 9 at 0.4. Struck out 236, which was just about a batter an inning. ERA plus of 215. So, I mean, great year there. I know that Cy Young, Arrieta, Kershaw, and Greinke all had great years that year. But yeah, great year from Arrieta to anchor this Cubs rotation that I've set up.
Just to add to that, I think that was also the year, that stud year where he had, the no-hitter, I believe.
Has he thrown 2 no-hitters or just the one?
I think one, and I was at that one, not to bring up a sore subject. But. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
at Dodger Stadium when he threw that one. That was a
Yeah,
pretty
and
amazing.
that Sunday night baseball game.
Yes, yes, amazing.
And then now we've got Mark Pryor in '03 with 7.9 wins. He went 18-6, ERA of 2.43. He struck out 245 in about 211 innings, led the league in FIP at 247. So, wow, he's a guy, and I guess I'll wait a few players to expand on this. Carlos Zambrano, the Big Z, in '04, 7.2 wins. He wins 16-8, ERA of 2.75. He led the league in one pitching category, and that was hit by pitches.
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
He had a temper.
He hit 20 guys. Baseball Reference does not keep another stat, which is Gatorade coolers destroyed, because Zambrano might have led the league in that category as well, right? I mean, he was a fiery competitor out there, wasn't he?
He never liked to be taken out of a game. Even if he gave up 10 runs, he would still want to stay in there.
And the other thing about Zambrano, he's probably happy he's not pitching in the league right now, because now with the universal DH, he wouldn't get to swing it.
That's
right.
right.
I mean, he could swing it, switch hitter too.
Absolutely. It gave the Cubs a definite advantage on the days that he was pitching. You actually had a legitimate 9-hitter.
Yeah, now the next starting pitcher I've got is Ryan Dempster from '08. Their division, he was the ace on that division-winning team in '08. 6.8 wins. He went 17-6, ERA under 3. Not a lot of strikeouts. Decent amount of strikeouts actually. 187 in just over 200 innings. But he was always kind of that workhorse, dependable guy. And finishing up the rotation, a lefty, Travis Wood from 2013. Not a great win-loss record at 9-12. Of course, people don't value the win-loss record anymore. Had a 3.11 ERA in 200 innings. FIP of 389. He was an all-star that year. I think the only pitcher in this rotation, actually, who was not an all-star was Arrieta, and he won the Cy Young Award that year. But Pryor, Zambrano, Dempster, and Wood, all all-stars in each of these years. Mm-hmm. And now, kind of as a swingman / reliever, I kind of cheated a little bit. And to get Kerry Wood from '98 on this roster, he went 13-6. ERA of 3.4. So he actually started all of his appearances that year with 26 starts, 166 and 2/3 innings, struck out 233, which was good to lead the league in Ks per 9 at 12.6.
Amazing.
Also led the league in hits per 9 at 6.3. And so now that we get to Wood, this is kind of what I wanted to touch on. Kerry Wood and Mark Pryor, I mean, those were kind of like the what could have been, right?
Well, and Carlos Zambrano was part of that group, to be honest, too. It was the 2003 playoff run against the Marlins where, you want to associate it with the Bartman incident or the complete collapse of the Cubs. Those were the 3 horses. They were all young. I think they were all 3 were under 25. And that was supposed to be, the Cubs' future, at least for the next few years after that.
Yeah.
We all know how that turned out.
Well, I know, Kerry Wood burst on the scene. He had, what might be, it's definitely in the discussion for like the greatest pitch game of all time. I think he threw like a 1-hitter where he struck out 20. I mean, it just
against a very good Astros team with the Killer Bees. That was a good squad.
Yeah. And that was just, dominant, 20 strikeouts, just showing kind of what could be. And Mark Pryor was a top draft pick out of USC, and he was great. And people, I think the comment on Pryor was like he had the perfect mechanics, and he's like never going to have any arm trouble. And, it turned out to be incredibly wrong. Right. So, yeah, both Wood and Pryor they had flashes and kind of showed early that, it might be like Hall of Fame careers, but they both, had injury trouble. Wood eventually moved to the bullpen. I think he closed for them for a little while, right?
Exactly. Yeah. He went away when some other teams wind up coming back towards the end of his career. I actually believe his last pitch was in a Cubs uniform, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. So it was, like I said, we've got some great years from them here on this roster, but it is disappointing, and that's just part of the nature of being a pitcher. You're one pitch away from, an injury that might derail your entire career.
Right.
And continuing along in the bullpen, we've got Turk Wendell in 96. He was a multi-inning reliever there, or he finished 49 games for them, saved 18. He threw 79 and a third innings across 70 appearances at a sub-3 ERA. Struck out just about a batter an inning. Joe Borowski in 02 had an ERA of about 2 3/4. Another guy who 73 games, 95 and 2/3 innings. So, he could get a lot of outs for you out of the pen. Bobby Howry in 06. Another guy, a lot of innings, 76 and 2/3 innings out of him. ERA of about 3.17. And then Carlos Marmol in 07. He went 5-1 out of the pen with an ERA under 1.5. That was, I think, before he took over the closing duties, because eventually he would close for them, right?
Correct, exactly.
And this was before he was a closer. He had one save that year, but just dominant. He struck out 96 guys in 69 and a third innings, good for 12.5 Ks per 9. Then Angel Guzman in 09, ERA of about 3 across 61 innings. And we've got the lefty Sean Marshall in 2011 to round out the staff. He was worth 2.5 wins out of the pen in 75 and 2/3 innings. He had an ERA of about 2.25, ERA plus of 173. By the way, Marmol's ERA plus was 3.25. So, you want to share any comments on that rotation, as well as the bullpen, and any thoughts on the staff as a whole?
Absolutely. I mean, I think just a few minutes ago, or in the earlier segment, I did mention how the Cubs currently, our starting pitching staff is one of the top in the majors, and our hitting is fantastic. And but our bullpen is an absolute mess. This list kind of shows you the exact same thing. You look at that set of relief pitchers right here from Turk. Turk was the most bizarre dude ever too. He had all these quirks and things that had the licorice between every inning, and brush his teeth. I mean, look at this list. You really don't have anybody that's formidable. I could take Dodger teams, right, and I feel like the Dodgers have, for a 5-6 year span, dominating relief pitchers, right?
Yeah, because as you mentioned, Chapman, we mentioned Chapman earlier. They acquired him in a trade in 2016, right, mid-year, so he didn't really have the volume. But yeah, you're right. They don't really have any. Like, who are some of their great closers in the past?
Lee Smith in the 80s. I mean, and he didn't last with us very long. There was Wild Thing Mitch Williams. How can you call him great? He was, maybe good for a year or two, but he couldn't find the plate. So I don't have a really good recollection of a dominating closer for an extended period of time. So this is what we've always had.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking about that, like, like, as I listen to it, as I look at this list, I'm not sure who I would give the ball to, to close a game. I'd probably go with Marmol. This was before his closing experience, but I mean, that's the one kind of dominant year out of this pen. Wins above replacement is not the best measure for a reliever, but he was worth, almost 3 wins.
as a
And
reliever.
yeah, and I mean, a lot of strikeouts. I look at it kind of for relievers. I like the strikeouts, come in because, you're coming in with guys on base and you just want that punch out. You don't want a blooper to drop in, or obviously you don't
Right.
want, a double off the wall.
Yep.
So yeah, you bring in Marmol to get those strikeouts, but yeah, not a lot of dominant relievers there. But yeah, solid staff with Arrieta leading the way. Yeah, so that's what we've got for the Cubs roster. And again, I want to remind all our listeners, if you guys want to make a roster, whether it's for the Cubs or another team, go ahead and visit the website, boxseatbanter.com. Download that template and share them with me. I would love to see those submissions. Now, looking over the roster I've created, there's certainly some guys who I wanted to get on but could not squeeze them on the roster. There's always tough decisions as I make these, as I assemble this puzzle. Sam, is there any names that you kind of might have expected to be on this roster that I did not include?
Yeah, there's one that I not so much surprised because I understand the construction of the roster, but I would hope had been on here. Aramis Ramirez played quite a few years with the team after he played, I think, with Pittsburgh. We got him from Pittsburgh as either a free agent or a trade. But he had some really stellar years, so I'm surprised he's not on here. Obviously, with Chris Bryant being in front of him and having that MVP year, it makes sense. Maybe there was a spot on the bench for him.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great point, and that was one of the guys that I struggle with. Yeah, as you mentioned, he was a very reliable hitter there at third for the Cubs for multiple years. Yeah, and that is kind of like a weak spot with my bench. I've got two first basemen there, two left-handed first basemen at that, who are not going to really kind of be able to play anywhere else.
And both deserve to be there too. I mean, you're picking Mark Grace and Rizzo. It's not like
yeah. But I just think the years didn't really line up for Ramirez. There were other guys who I needed to kind of fill out the roster. But yeah, that's definitely a guy who has a strong case to be on this type of roster. Another guy who I was kind of surprised I couldn't fit him on here was Moises Alou. Great player, a long career, played for several teams, some solid years with the Cubs. But it kind of same rationale as Aramis Ramirez. It just didn't kind of fit in here. Then some of the pitchers who I could not fit on the roster were Lester and Hendricks.
Right.
And Hendricks, I think, more recently has he's really blossomed later in his career. Had some big moments, but yeah, couldn't fit him on. And Lester, another thing, it just didn't kind of, because in recent years they've been so stacked with with Bryant and Rizzo and Baez and Arrieta and these guys and Contreras, and it's that such a small period, and you just don't really have enough years to pick all of those guys. So then the last one that I kind of struggled with was, and this one may come back to bite me, but in 2012 I got Alfonso Soriano over Darwin Barney and Starlin Castro. Soriano played the outfield that year. I kind of needed a bench outfielder. But yeah, I think Castro and Barney had great value with the defense that year.
That's right.
So, those guys were better players, had better years. Well, at least were better players that year. But I felt like I needed the bench outfield. Otherwise, I would have had, 4 bench infielders.
That's right.
I guess you could put Brian out there in a pinch or something. But yeah, I went with the outfielder to kind of balance the roster a little bit. And yeah, as you mentioned also in the previous segment, it was tough to really find relievers. These guys each had decent years, but yeah, there's no real big name reliever in the bunch. So yeah, those are the issues that I struggle with. And again, listeners, if you want to critique my roster, the inbox is open. Share your thoughts on my roster. Sometimes I'll be listening to a podcast. I'll find a podcast that's an older one, and I'll listen to old episodes, just go back catching up, and they'll ask for comments and stuff. And I don't share my comments because it was so long ago. But, if you find this podcast and you're listening to it and, it's 2022 right now or something and podcasts are still a thing and you're listening to this, feel free, reach out. I don't mind if you're coming at me a couple years later. Share those thoughts with me. Let's get to the Q&A section now. So we open it up on Twitter and Instagram for you to submit questions. So make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Again, it's at Boxseat Banter on both Twitter and Instagram. We open it up for questions before we record, and we get to those on the show. So we've got a few questions here about the Cubs. First one comes from Joey. Now, Joey asks, the Cubs GM Theo Epstein built a championship team way back in 2016, but they've not really made much noise since. Is this the year that they're back in the mix? Now, as we mentioned, they won the World Series in 2016. 2017, they lost in the NLCS to the Dodgers. 2018, they tied with the Brewers for the Central. They lost the game 163. Then they lost the wild card game to the Rockies. And I think last year they missed the postseason entirely. So they've kind of been on a downward trend since that 2016 year. You mentioned they're off to that hot start this year. So then getting back to Joey's question, is this year that they are back in the mix? What do you think, Sam?
Well, I think so. They've made noise since 2016. So Joey's comment is not completely accurate there. It's just that it has been a downward trajectory, of course, especially with last year not even sniffing the playoffs, Mm-hmm. But is this year, I'm a Cubs fan. Every year's the year, how many years have I said, wait until next year and it's, end of April, except for a coronavirus here. And then you're like, okay, looking forward to next year. Since 2016, the fan base has felt confident. We have felt confident that every year is our year. Is this our year again? Now 2020, COVID 2020? Yes, it is. We're back, baby. We're back.
All right. He says they're back. And yeah, it seemed like, when they, so in 2015, they got swept by the Mets in the NLCS, correct?
Exactly.
And that year, it did seem, they were young. It seemed like they were a year away. They got to the playoffs that year, which probably helped their experience a lot for 2016. In 2016, they go out and win it all. And I think a lot of people throughout baseball thought that, like this Cubs team, because they had a lot of young talent that was going to be there, that's still there. And they thought they were going to be, they beat the Dodgers in that NLCS. Then they played in the NLCS again in 2017. And I was like, well, this is going to be like, we're going to see Cubs Dodgers in the NLCS for like 5 years in a row. And yeah, it has not happened. But, like the Brewers, to their credit, they've had some great years. They've assembled some great squads. But, yeah, they're playing great. And so maybe
you could have seen a little bit of complacency maybe after 2016, a lot of the same faces and not that you're really going to change a core, but, goes to show you there's a lot of factors that come into play, right? To building that kind of consistency. And if the hunger of a World Series is, you don't want to say gone, but, you win one, suddenly you have that part satisfied. I don't know how players or teams keep themselves motivated to kind of reach the final prize,
Well, and, maybe the new manager will kind of go into that as well because, Joe Maddon, regarded as one of the great managers in baseball and, won the World Series there, but he kind of, I don't know what happened there between him and Epstein, if they kind of rubbed each other the wrong way eventually, if he wore out his welcome there. But yeah, it seemed like it's kind of disappointing end there to the Madden era. But yeah, maybe this new blood there with David Ross will help turn things around there.
One can only hope.
And our next question also comes from Joey. Leading up to the 2016 World Series push, the Cubs traded away a few big name prospects, some of which are making big names for themselves elsewhere. If one can regret such trades with a straight face while holding a World Series trophy, which of them stings the most? So now, yeah, to touch on that, when the saying kind of goes, flags fly forever. So yeah, it may hurt that you do not have a certain prospect or player anymore, but yeah, I don't think anyone in Chicago would mind not having it. But yeah, are there any players who are traded away who maybe a little bummed out on that they're not wearing the Cubs uniform right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's two big ones, and they were highly regarded prospects from the get-go up, right when we signed them. And I think they were both international signings. Gleyber Torres, that was the one for Chapman.
Right.
And while Gleyber looks like a great, he looks like he's going to be a great MLB player. Saying that, the trade itself for Chapman, I'm not quite. He was pretty dominating when he got brought on, and that's probably like the best closer we've ever had since Lee Smith, probably since the '80s. So it's justifiable, right? Because
absolutely,
2016 we won the World Series. So I you hate to see him go. At the same time, you did get quite a bit for him, right? You got the hardware, so you're like okay with that. The other one is Eloy Jimenez, and I think it was. That was 2017. It was the year after when we traded him to the White Sox.
Was that for Quintana?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
For Jose Quintana. And obviously the results haven't been the same because Jose Quintana is, he hasn't measured up to what we were hoping we were getting, a young, controllable arm lefty. And he hasn't been all that. So I guess it's hindsight's 2020, right? It didn't result in a winning year. So you do regret those. You regret the Eloy one a little bit more, but those are the two big ones. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, definitely would not go back on that Torres trade. Definitely rather have the hardware. So, but yeah, he's the one that kind of bummed out on the most. And that trade seemed out like a real win-win between the Cubs and the Yankees. The Yankees got a great player. The Cubs got the World Series title. Right. And then Chapman in the offseason goes and re-signs with the Yankees. So the Yankees really made out on that deal.
Absolutely.
And that the deal with the White Sox that you brought up, I think, a lot of people at the time thought that was a win-win deal. Because as you mentioned, Quintana was a young, cost-controllable pitcher who was a lot of people thought had a very bright future. But yeah, it has not worked out as the Cubs envisioned. And our final question this week comes from Randy, and it is a 2-word question. All he said is Steve Bartman. So I'm kind of surprised that we've gone on this Cubs podcast, but I guess if we did this in 2015 before they were World Series champs, Bartman would have been much more prevalent. But we've made it this far without bringing him up. So you lived it, at the time it was Game 6 in the 2003 NLCS. They were like 6 outs away or something from winning the pennant.
Exactly.
What were your thoughts when that happened, when he, interfered with Moises Alou trying to catch that pop-up down the line?
The day of the event, we were all together with my buddies, and we just couldn't believe what had unfolded. It was Game 6, too. Yeah, it was Game 6, so we were 6 outs away. And I got to tell you, I know there was a Game 7 the next day. I don't think anybody really cared about it. We actually thought, we knew we were going to lose the next day, too. We knew the series was done, as much as everybody wanted to be like, we still have one more game. Steve Bartman, uh, poor guy, has never capitalized on his fame. He's never, from what I understand, ever taken a dollar to do an interview, or I'm sure he could have been a multimillionaire right now talking to people about this, and he hasn't taken advantage of it once. Unjustifiably, we have vilified the poor guy. Um, Sorry, dude. Sorry, Steve. I was
Yeah,
part of him for like that 1 year, but after that, you did not deserve that, man.
it is. Yeah, it is one of the. I mean, it's a very sad image. Him there with his headphones on, sitting in a seat down the line. I'm sure he just wanted to crawl into a hole and wish the whole thing never happened. Have you seen? There's these cardboard cutouts in stadiums across the country now. Have you seen in Seattle? Actually, there's a cardboard cutout of Steve Bartman there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Honestly, you know what? The Cubs playing those home games and they don't have the cardboard cutouts out there, but I would be okay if they had several rows of just Steve Bartman cutouts. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, well, and they eventually did win that World Series in 2016. So hopefully all is forgiven with Cubs fans and Steve Bartman. So yeah, those are the questions we received this week. We love getting those questions and responding to them. So again, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Box Seat Banter. We'll throw it out there for the questions. You can reply to that and get those questions in. So Sam, thank you for your perspective on those, with your answers on those. It's time to put my roster to the test and grade it. And I grade these rosters kind of against all the other rosters that I've made for the other 29 teams. So Sam, what do you think of this roster that I've assembled? How would you grade it? Maybe discuss the strengths and weaknesses if you want to share any.
Oh, absolutely. If you don't mind, I'll just take like sort of segments as we walk through this roster. So just looking at the starting lineup on the bat side, on the hitting side. But the infield looks fantastic. I mean, I think that could compare to a lot of infields through the last 25 years, which this project kind of, it entails in that time period. So that looks pretty great. Kind of looking at the outfield, besides Sammy, having Brian McRae and Henry Rodriguez, I mean, to call it weak is an understatement. They had 2 good years, but heck, I don't want Henry Rodriguez and Brian McRae in my starting outfield for 25-year, Cubs roster. So that's where I am with that. I mean, heck, I love our bench. Rizzo and Grace are on the bench. That's fantastic. Young swiped almost 60 stolen bases. Again, that works for me. So the bench looks really good. Alfonso rounding it out as the outfielder there, and Gio having that one great year that he had as catcher. So that looks pretty great. Moving on down to the pitching staff. Starting pitchers, amazing. I'm not going to have an issue with any one of these guys. I could, throw that out against other 25-year teams, and it'll be competitive. I like that. But we get down to the bullpen, and how I feel about the current state of the Cubs bullpen. And you know what? This one doesn't look really any prettier. Kerry Wood makes it look pretty, but other than that, that bullpen is kind of roughshod, if you ask me. That's what I got for as far as critiquing it.
Do you have would you assign it a letter grade?
Oh, sure. I do that. Let's just go with honestly, a B. I don't know if with as bad as that bullpen is, that's all I got.
Yeah, I agree with you that infield is strong, and a lot of versatility there. Baez, Zobrist, Bryant. Bryant can play in the outfield. Zobrist can play all over. Baez can play, second, short, and if you can play those 2 positions, you can probably play anywhere. Although the downside is that they, with 3 first basemen on the roster, they would probably have to pretty much stick to their current positions. So their versatility is kind of wasted. But yeah, it's still a very good infield. I agree with you. The outfield is the weak spot. I was kind of disappointed. We talked about closers, but what about center fielders? Like, what great center fielders have the Cubs had?
Well, Brian McRae.
And yeah, the other one I forgot to mention earlier now is coming back to my mind. Jason Hayward is nowhere on this roster. They signed him to a huge contract, but he has not kind of really fulfilled that contract. Yes, outfield, aside from Sosa's monster year, the outfield is pretty weak. Good catching duo. I like that with Contreras and Soto. As you mentioned, I agree with the pitching. You got good strikeout numbers there. That bullpen is not the strongest. But yeah, so overall, I would give them a C. I think they're a solid C. Yeah, just I think with that outfield, you'd like more production there offensively, and yeah, the back end of the bullpen, too many question marks there. So I give them a solid C though. That's my grade. If you want to critique my roster, give me a grade. Talk about the strengths and weaknesses. Again, that inbox is open. Let me have it. At Boxseat Banter, Twitter and Instagram, or you can visit the website boxseatbanter.com. It's time to wrap up the podcast here, so we'll each share our final thoughts. Now, Sam, the lifelong Cubs fan, I will let you go first to share your kind of final thoughts on the Cubs.
Well, being a Cubs fan goes even way beyond just watching the games. Growing up in the area, not as much in high school, but college, I still went to college in Chicago, and I can't tell you how many classes I ditched to go watch games, especially early on. Opening day, I never missed an opening day. Being a Cubs fan is, like I said, goes beyond the players. It's just the whole feeling of Wrigley and the area, and kind of the experiences that we all went through with my friends and fellow fans. And they hold a near dear place in my heart. My dad worked a lot, and the only thing he managed to do every single summer is to take myself and my two younger brothers to a game at least once a year. And that's what it means being a Cubs fan. Most of the time, it's because of the stories that and the events and the experiences you had with your family. So I love talking about the Cubs. Still watch, even here. I try to watch every single game. I'll always be a Cubs fan. So.
All right. Thank you for those thoughts, Sam. And as I share my kind of final thoughts, the Cubs, they've got a great fan base, one of the great fan bases in all of baseball. And, even through all those down years, the people of Chicago loved their Cubs. They were, the kind of the lovable losers. And it was so great, I think, for everyone to see the Cubs win that World Series in 2016 to end that long suffering, because, they have been such a supportive fan base over the years. So it was very, kind of fulfilling to see them experience that. And I know that you really enjoyed that, being there, traveling back to Chicago to be a part of that. But, as we kind of mentioned, as Joey touched on in one of his questions, that, with Epstein there winning that World Series in 2016, I think a lot of people looked like it was going to be the first of several. They've been in contention, but they haven't been as big of a threat as they were in 2016. Mm-hmm. So, we'll see if they're able to kind of maintain it with that core. They have, pretty much the same core who was a part of that, with Baez, Contreras, Rizzo, Bryant. So they have that. And yeah, we'll see if they can continue, because like I said, they've been they've contended, they've been in the postseason, but they haven't been that threat. We'll see if they can regain it. I think they can. They have a lot of talent. They've got a new voice with David Ross. It might help. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Cubs. And that's what we'll finish this podcast with. Sam, I appreciate you joining me today. There's no bigger Cubs fan than I know. And I know there's a lot of big Cubs fans, but you're the biggest one that I know. So, Sam, thank you for joining the program here with us today.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, this is Billy Ballas of Box Seat Banter signing off.